Hello folks, today we are making Irish soda bread, which is a quick bread from Ireland that is traditionally made around St. Patrick's Day. This is a recipe that's been in my family for a long time, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys today. So I've done my mise en place here. I've set out all of my ingredients that I'm going to add in. I'm giving a point to each of the ingredients. So we're going to start by making the buttermilk, which I've included in my how-to section. If I'm making this for several loaves around the St. Patrick's Day, I will buy some buttermilk, but this way works perfectly fine. Just add a teaspoon of vinegar or lemon juice to a cup of milk and let that sit while you prep the rest of your ingredients. So the next thing we're going to do is take our 3 tablespoons of unsalted cold butter and dice that up nice and small to make it easier for us to cut into the flour mixture later. So I'm breaking it up, as you can see here, to make it super easy to add in. So I've got my whisked. We're going to whisk to incorporate the flour, which is in the orange bowl. I've got our baking powder, baking soda, salt, and sugar in that one, and just gently whisk to incorporate completely. You don't want a straight salty bite. So now we're going to cut in our butter into the flour mixture using a pastry blender or forks or your hands, really whatever is your preference. Do recommend, if you're going to use your fingers, sometimes people really have hot hands, it'll melt the butter, which is not quite what we're going for. But my hands were very cold and my bowl was too small, so I ended up having to go in with my fingers anyways to really, you want that to be a nice, fine, crumbly texture. You don't want any big chunks of butter. So the next thing we're going to do is add in our raisins. We add them into the dry mixture because we want to coat them in with flour, so that way we get a nice even dispersion of the raisins within the product. So next thing is to make a well, and we're going to take our buttermilk mixture and slowly incorporate it. I did it in 3 additions. 3 to 4 is perfectly sufficient. So keep adding that, making a well, mixing until it is pretty much incorporated. It'll still be a little bit crumbly because there's not a lot of liquid in this. I'll show you what you want the dough to look like after I finish mixing it. So there you go. So as you can see, it's mostly incorporated, but not completely. We're going to finish incorporating it by kneading it on a lightly floured surface. So here's my countertop. I just put down a little bit of flour. You don't want too much. And just dump that whole thing right on there. So knead mostly by folding it over itself, using primarily the back of your palm. Once it starts to really come together, you really don't want to over knead it. That'll make it really tough. We still want it to be quite light. It will be a rather dense bread, but you don't want it to be chewy. So I probably kneaded it for maybe 5 minutes, just until it's loosely incorporated, and there you go. That's what it's going to look like when it's fully kneaded, fully incorporated. Next, bring over your 7-inch cake pan, round dish, and I'm just kind of placing it in there. You can knead it all the way to the edge. I like it a little bit taller, so I'm not going to knead it all the way to the edge. That's what my grandmother would always do, and sometimes those edges get a little bit too crispy. So I just want to flatten it out a little bit, and as you can see, I'm kind of patching around the edges, because I don't want it to be too kind of jagged, because then those ends might crisp too much and burn a little bit. So I'm just giving it a nice smooth look. It's still going to look quite rustic, but now here we're adding some little vents for steam, right? So the traditional way is to just do a nice big fat X right across the top, about 1/4 inch deep. Steak knives are fine, butter knives are good too, and that's what your X is going to look like. Next is baking. We're going to put our little loaf into the oven as centered as possible. Center of the oven, center of the rack. That's going to give you the most even bake possible. And we're going to bake it for 40 to 50 minutes on 375. Mine baked for 45. And this is what your finished product is going to look like. Crunchy, crispy on the outside, soft in the inside, And we've got our raisins that are nice and evenly dispersed. I hope you guys enjoy!